Ted Kaczynski's bombing spree claimed the life of 3 individuals and wounded 23 others over the period of 17 years. Why is he, as a Harvard graduate and considered as a mad genius by many, give up on his career to live off grid, seclude himself from society, and start the bombing chaos that shook the world? What was his motive for doing so? Theodore John Kaczynski was born on May 22, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois, to Wanda and Theodore Kaczynski, a Polish-American couple. Kaczynski had an adverse response to some medication when he was a newborn, and he spent time in seclusion as he recovered. According to some sources, he had a personality change after being admitted to the hospital. The arrival of his younger brother, David, is said to have had a significant impact on him as well. The family moved out of the city when he was a child to Evergreen Park, a Chicago suburb. Kaczynski's parents put a lot of pressure on him to succeed in school. Kaczynski was a bright child who skipped 2 grades in his early education. He was, however, smaller than the other children and was labeled strange due to his intellect. Despite this, Kaczynski was involved in school activities such as German and chess clubs. Kaczynski went to Evergreen Park Community High School and excelled in his studies. He was a member of the mathematics, biology, coin, and German clubs, as well as playing trombone in marching band. A former student remarked in 1996, he was never really seen as a person. As an individual personality, he was always regarded as a walking brain, so to speak. During this time, Kaczynski developed a strong interest in mathematics and spent hours researching and solving difficult issues. He became connected with a group of like-minded youngsters who were interested in science and mathematics, and were dubbed the Briefcase Boys because they liked to carry briefcases. Kaczynski was intellectually ahead of his peers throughout high school. He was immediately moved to more difficult mathematics class, where he quickly grasped the topic. He bypassed 11th grade and graduated at the age of 15 by attending summer school. Kaczynski was one of 5 national merit finalists from his high school, and he was urged to go to Harvard College. In 1948, at the age of 16, he was accepted to Harvard on a scholarship. Kaczynski, according to a classmate, was emotionally unprepared. They packed him up and sent him to Harvard before he was ready. He didn't even have a driver's license. He studied mathematics there and participated in a psychological experiment led by Professor Henry A. Murray, in which subjects were subjected to severe verbal abuse. This experiment is also considered to have influenced Kaczynski's later actions. Subjects were told that they would discuss personal philosophy with their classmates and that they would have to submit essays outlining their own ideas and goals. The essays were given to an anonymous person who will confront and denigrate the subject, using the essay as ammunition in what Murray called vehement, sweeping, and personally abusive attacks. The psychological response of the patient were observed using electrodes. These encounters were filmed, and the subject's outbursts of rage were repeatedly replayed for them. The experiment lasted 3 years, with Kaczynski being verbally abused and humiliated every week. Kaczynski put in 200 hours for the research. Kaczynski completed his education at the University of Michigan after graduating from Harvard in 1962. He taught classes and worked on his dissertation, which received a lot of attention. In 1967, Kaczynski received his PhD from the institution and went on to teach at the University of California, Berkeley. Kaczynski, on the other hand, struggled at Berkeley, as he struggled to deliver his lectures and frequently avoided eye contact with his students. In 1969, he abruptly resigned from his associate professorship. Kaczynski had left his former life in the early 1970s and relocated to Montana. He constructed himself a modest cottage outside Lincoln, where he hunted rabbits, grew vegetables, and spent a lot of time reading. Kaczynski formed his own anti-government and anti-technology worldview while living in this secluded, survivalist lifestyle. Kaczynski sent a series of increasingly sophisticated explosives between 1978 and 1995, killing 3 individuals and injuring 23 others. Kaczynski was blamed for 16 bombings. Buckley Chris, a professor of material engineering on the Northwestern University, was the target of Kaczynski's first postal bomb. A package bearing Chris' written address was discovered in a parking lot at the University of Illinois at Chicago on May 25, 1978. Chris was concerned since the box had been returned to him, so he phoned campus police. Officer Terry Marker attempted to open the item, which he detonated, injuring Officer Marker. After the explosions in Chicago in May 1978, Kaczynski returned to the city and worked at a foam rubber plant with his father and brother. Ted's brother dismissed him in August 1978 for composing derogatory line breaks about a female supervisor Ted had briefly courted. The supervisors occasionally remembered Kaczynski as bright and quiet, but he had a later recollection of their friendship and flatly denied that they had ever romantically involved. Kaczynski's second bomb was sent to Northwestern University about a year after the first. but graduate student John Harris unwrapped the device, which was hidden inside a cigar box, and put on the table. He suffered minor injuries. In 1979, a bomb was placed in the cargo hold of American Airlines Flight 444, a Boeing 727 flying from Chicago to Washington, D.C. The bomb did not explode due to defective timing device, but it did emit smoke, forcing the pilots to make an emergency landing. It had enough power, authorities warned, to obliterate the airline if it burst. Kaczynski's next explosion was aimed at the United Airlines president, Percy Wood. Most explosives had bogus clues that Kaczynski purposefully made difficult to discover in order to make them look more credible. While the explosive device changed over time, several had the initial FC written on piece inside, which Kaczynski subsequently claimed stood for Freedom Club, and the Eugene O'Neill $1 stamp often used to send his boxes. He put detective hint in the device and prepared them with extraordinary caution to avoid leaving fingerprints. Fingerprints recovered on the several device did not match those found on letters ascribed to Kaczynski. One explosive was hidden inside a copy of Sloan Wilson novel, Ice Brothers. Kaczynski's crime, according to the FBI, had a theme of nature, trees, and wood. In his explosive, he frequently added tree branch and bark fragments. Patrick C. Fisher, a professor at Vanderbilt University, was targeted with a bomb in May of the following year. Fisher was on vacation in Puerto Rico at the time, and his secretary, Janet Smith, was injured in the face and arms when the bomb went off. The University of California, Berkeley was the target of Kaczynski's NEC-2 explosive. The first, in July 1982, left engineering professor Diogenes Angelico seriously injured. John Hauser, a graduate student and captain of the United States Air Force, lost 4 fingers and vision in one eye nearly 3 years later in May 1985. The bomb was handcrafted by Kaczynski out of wooden parts. A device delivered to the Boeing Company in Auburn, Washington, was defused by a bomb squad the next month. Hugh Scruton, a 38-year-old computer business owner from Sacramento, California, was killed by a nail and split a loaded explosive planted in the parking lot of his store in late 1985. On February 20, 1987, a similar attack on a computer business occurred in Salt Lake City, Utah, when Gettlewright attempted to remove the explosive camouflage as a piece of timber from the store parking area. He was wounded. The blast destroyed nerve in the right left arm and shattered his torso with nearly 200 pieces of shrapnel. While detonating the explosive in Salt Lake City, Kaczynski was seen. As a result, a drawing of the suspect as a hooded man with mustache and aviator glasses was widely circulated. After a 6-year hiatus, Kaczynski addressed a bomb to Charles Epstein's house at the University of California, San Francisco in 1993. When Epstein opened the gift, he lost many fingers. On the same weekend, Kaczynski addressed a bomb to David Gleurner, a Yale University computer science professor. Gleurner was blind in one eye, deaf in one ear, and had a section of his right hand amputated. Thomas Moser, a Burson Mass terror executive, was killed in 1994 after receiving a postal bomb at his home in New Jersey. Kaczynski claimed in the letter to the New York Times they sent the bomb because of Moser's effort restoring Exxon public image following the Exxon Valdez oil catastrophe. In 1995, assassination of Gilbert Brand Murray, president of the timber industry lobbying group California Forestry Association, by mail bomb addressed to previous President William Dennison, who had retired. Shortly after, geneticist Philip Sharps of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology got a threatening letter. The U.S. Postal Service, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms, and the Federal Bureau of the Investigation all took note of Kaczynski bombing spree in 1979, and the FBI task team known as Unabomb, which stood for University Airline Bombing, was formed. The unknown subject became known as the Unabomber over time. The task group grew to more than 150 full-time members over the following 2 decades. The FBI didn't get their break until 1995, when Kaczynski's 35,000-word essay, Industrial Society and Its Future, was published in the media. The manifesto was published in the Washington Post and the New York Times on September 19, 1995, and the FBI cued into David Kaczynski's description of his disturbed brother, Ted, amid hundreds of comments and tips received daily for months. The FBI linguistic analysts established that the manifesto author was, in fact, Kaczynski, on letters and papers written by Ted and supplied to FBI by David. Investigators apprehended Unabomber on April 3, 1996, at his tiny primitive cabin near Lincoln, Montana, where they discovered highly detailed journals, approximately 40,000 pages, detailing Kaczynski crimes, as well as numerous bomb parts and one complete bomb ready to be mailed to another victim. In 2011, many of these items were auctioned off, raising approximately $190,000 for his victims and their families. Kaczynski was charged with several charges linked to his several bombing attacks, and was arraigned in Sacramento, the residence of his third and last murder victim. He turned down an insanity plea, but in early 1998, he attempted suicide in his detention cell, prompting a mental assessment. Paranoid schizophrenia was identified in Kaczynski. As a consequence, a plea deal was given to Kaczynski, allowing him to avoid the death penalty. Kaczynski pleaded guilty to his crime on January 22, 1998, and received 8 life sentences without the possibility of release. Kaczynski was sent to the Alcatraz of the Rockies, a United States penitentiary administrative maximum facility in Florence, Colorado, where he spends 23 hours a day alone in his cell. Kaczynski has spent the last 2 decades in the prison as an unusual socially connected person. He formed friendships with fellow ADX inmates Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber, and Ramzi Yousef, the 1993 World Trade Center bomber. On the outside, Kaczynski wrote messages to thousands of pen pals. This regular human contact in a stark contrast to his existence before incarceration. Today, the Harvard Education National Merit finalist and math genius with an IQ of 167 communicates with the media on a daily basis from behind bars. His 3-year involvement in a Harvard psychology experiment led by Henry Murray, which attempted to explore the boundaries of mental deconstruction through weekly humiliation meetings, continues to pique curiosity. Indeed, some speculate that this experiment may have harmed young Kaczynski, who entered Harvard on a scholarship at the age of 16, and described the experience as the worst experience of his life. Perhaps, Kaczynski was hinting at this when he listed his occupation as prisoner and his 8 life sentences as wards in his 2012 response to the 50th reunion of the Harvard Alumni Association Directory Inquiry. As of now, Kaczynski is still alive and serves his life sentence in ADX. He maintains that he is not mentally sick, and he writes letters and shares stories with his fans all around the world.